Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell stepped off the transport helicopter onto the concrete landing pad of Naval Base Coronado, her single duffel bag slung over her shoulder and a manila folder containing her transfer orders clutched in her free hand. The Pacific wind whipped her brown hair across her face as she surveyed her new assignment. The base stretched before her like a small city, with gray buildings arranged in perfect military precision against the backdrop of the San Diego skyline. She looked nothing like what the seasoned officers expected from someone with her impressive file. At 5 feet 4 inches tall, with a soft voice and an almost apologetic smile, Sarah appeared more suited for a library than a naval command center. Her uniform was pressed to perfection, but she wore it with an uncertainty that made veteran sailors exchange knowing glances. Here was another desk jockey, they thought, probably assigned to push papers and stay out of everyone's way. Commander Jake Harrison, the base operations officer, met her at the helipad. His weathered face and graying temples spoke of decades at sea, and his handshake was firm enough to test her resolve. "Welcome to Coronado, Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, studying her with the practiced eye of someone who had seen countless young officers come and go. "I trust your flight was comfortable?" "Yes, sir. Thank you for meeting me personally," Sarah replied, her voice barely audible over the distant sound of fighter jets conducting training exercises. She followed Harrison across the tarmac, struggling slightly with her bag as they walked toward the main administrative building. "Your reputation precedes you," Harrison continued, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely impressed by whatever he had heard. "Naval Academy graduate, top of your class in logistics and strategic planning. Though I notice you've never served aboard a ship for any extended period." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of his assessment. "That's correct, sir. Most of my experience has been in staff positions and planning roles." She didn't mention the classified nature of much of her previous work. The late nights spent analyzing intelligence reports and coordinating operations that officially never happened. The base was bustling with activity as they walked through the central courtyard. Sailors in working uniforms hurried between buildings, their conversations a mixture of technical jargon and good-natured complaints about duty assignments. Several stopped to salute Harrison, their eyes lingering curiously on the new officer beside him. "You'll be working in the Strategic Operations Center," Harrison explained as they entered the main building. The corridors were lined with photographs of distinguished naval officers and historical moments from the base's long history. "We coordinate training exercises, logistics support, and special mission planning for the Pacific Fleet. It's demanding work that requires attention to detail and the ability to work under pressure." They paused outside a set of heavy wooden doors marked with the insignia of the Strategic Operations Center. Through the glass windows, Sarah could see a large room filled with computer workstations. Wall-mounted displays showing ship positions and weather data, and officers hunched over charts and reports. "The team you'll be joining has been together for 3 years, Harrison continued. "They're good people, but they've developed their own way of doing things. Lieutenant Commander Peterson runs the day-to-day operations, and he doesn't particularly enjoy having his routines disrupted." The warning in his voice was clear. Sarah straightened her shoulders slightly. "I understand, sir. I'm here to contribute however I can and learn from the team's experience." Harrison's expression softened marginally. "Good attitude. Now, before we go in, let me give you some advice. This isn't the academy, and it's not a Pentagon planning office. Real operations happen here, with real consequences. The decisions made in that room affect thousands of sailors and millions of dollars in equipment. Don't try to impress anyone with textbook theories. Watch, listen, and prove yourself through your work." The Strategic Operations Center was exactly as intimidating as Sarah had expected. 24 officers and enlisted personnel worked at various stations, their conversations a constant hum of radio chatter, telephone calls, and quiet discussions over tactical displays. Wall-mounted screens showed real-time positions of naval vessels across the Pacific, weather patterns, and training exercise parameters. Lieutenant Commander Mark Peterson looked up from his desk as they entered. He was a compact man in his mid-30s with the kind of intense focus that suggested he took his responsibilities seriously. His desk was organized with military precision, every document and piece of equipment in its designated place. "Peterson, this is Lieutenant Mitchell, your new strategic planning officer," Harrison announced. Peterson stood and extended his hand, his grip firm but brief. "Lieutenant, I've reviewed your file. Impressive academic credentials." The way he said it suggested that academic credentials were of limited value in his world. "Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to contributing to the team's mission." "We'll see," Peterson replied, then turned to gesture toward a workstation near the back of the room. "Your desk is over there. Chief Martinez will get you set up with your computer access and brief you on our current operations. We're in the middle of planning Exercise Neptune Shield, a major multi-ship training operation scheduled for next month." Sarah spent her first day trying to absorb the enormous amount of information flowing through the operations center. The complexity of coordinating multiple naval vessels, aircraft squadrons, and support units was staggering. Every detail had to be planned and cross-referenced, from fuel consumption rates to weather windows and communication protocols. Chief Martinez, a veteran petty officer with 22 years of service, proved to be an invaluable guide. "The key to surviving in here," he explained quietly while showing her how to access the various computer systems, "is to never promise something you can't deliver and always have a backup plan for your backup plan." Sarah nodded, making mental notes about the interpersonal dynamics she was observing. Peterson was clearly competent, but seemed to view her as a potential disruption to his well-oiled machine. Several other officers were polite but distant, adopting a wait-and-see attitude toward the new arrival. By the end of her first week, Sarah had begun to understand the rhythm of the operations center. She arrived early each morning, stayed late to review the day's activities, and spent her lunch breaks studying technical manuals and operational procedures. Her questions were thoughtful but carefully timed to avoid interrupting critical work. The first real test came during a simulated emergency exercise. A training scenario had been designed to test the base's response to a coordinated attack on multiple Pacific Fleet vessels. Sarah was assigned to assist with logistics coordination, ensuring that rescue and support assets could be positioned and supplied appropriately. As the exercise unfolded, it became clear that the original plan had a significant flaw. The fuel consumption calculations for the rescue helicopters were based on optimal weather conditions, but the scenario included a major storm system that would dramatically increase flight times and fuel requirements. Sarah noticed the discrepancy while reviewing the helicopter deployment schedules, but hesitated to speak up. She was the new person, and correcting what appeared to be an oversight by more experienced officers seemed presumptuous. However, as she ran the numbers again, the problem became undeniable. "Lieutenant Commander Peterson," she said quietly, approaching his desk during a brief lull in the communications traffic. "I think there might be an issue with the helicopter fuel calculations for the rescue operations." Peterson looked up with barely concealed annoyance. "What kind of issue?" "The flight time estimates appear to be based on normal weather conditions, but the scenario includes a storm system with 60-knot winds. That would increase fuel consumption by approximately 30% and extend flight times significantly. Several of the rescue helicopters might not have enough fuel to complete their missions and return to base." Peterson studied the documents Sarah had prepared, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern as he verified her calculations. "Chief Martinez, get me the meteorology report for Grid 77 Alpha," he called out. The chief quickly pulled up the weather data on his screen. "Winds at 65 knots, gusting to 80, visibility less than 2 miles. Peterson was already reaching for his phone to contact the exercise coordinators. "This is Peterson in Strategic Ops. We need to halt the helicopter deployments in Sector 7. We have a fuel consumption issue that could put aircraft at risk." The exercise was paused while new calculations were performed and alternative plans developed. Sarah found herself working directly with the helicopter squadron commanders to develop modified flight plans that would accomplish the mission objectives while maintaining safe fuel margins. When the exercise resumed 2 hours later, the helicopter operations proceeded flawlessly. The potential crisis had been averted through careful planning and attention to detail. "Nice catch, Mitchell," Peterson said quietly as the exercise concluded. That kind of oversight could have been catastrophic in a real situation. Word of Sarah's contribution spread quickly through the operations center. The other officers began to include her more actively in their discussions and planning sessions. She was still the new person, but she had demonstrated that her careful, analytical approach had real value. Over the following weeks, Sarah continued to prove herself through consistent, reliable work. She developed improved scheduling systems for training exercises, identified potential supply chain vulnerabilities, and created contingency plans for various emergency scenarios. Her suggestions were always well-researched and clearly presented, never seeking credit but focused on improving operational effectiveness. The breakthrough moment came during a particularly complex multinational exercise involving American, Japanese, and Australian naval forces. The coordination requirements were enormous, with different communication systems, operational procedures, and command structures all needing to work together seamlessly. Sarah had been assigned to work on the logistics coordination, but as she studied the overall exercise plan, she began to see patterns and connections that others had missed. The timing of various operational phases could be optimized to reduce fuel consumption and maintenance requirements while actually improving the training value of the exercise. She spent 3 days developing a comprehensive analysis, complete with detailed timelines, resource allocation charts, and risk assessments. When she finally presented her findings to Peterson, his reaction surprised her. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need more of," he said, reviewing her work. "You've identified efficiency improvements that could save us hundreds of thousands of dollars while actually enhancing the training objectives. I want you to present this to Commander Harrison and the Exercise Planning Committee." Sarah's presentation to the senior officers was a success. Her quiet confidence and thorough preparation impressed even the most skeptical members of the planning committee. The exercise was modified to incorporate her recommendations, and the results exceeded all expectations. As her first 6 months at the base drew to a close, Sarah had established herself as an invaluable member of the Strategic Operations Center team. Her desk had become a hub of activity, with other officers regularly seeking her input on complex planning problems. She had moved from being an outsider to being an essential part of the team's success. But Sarah knew that her real work was just beginning. The skills and relationships she was developing at Coronado were all part of a larger plan, one that would require her to exceed every expectation and assumption about what a quiet, soft-spoken naval officer could accomplish. The foundation was being laid for something much more significant than anyone around her could imagine. 2 years after her arrival at Coronado, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had transformed from a quiet newcomer into one of the most respected strategic planners on the base. Her promotion to lieutenant commander came with new responsibilities and higher expectations, but also with the kind of challenges that would test every skill she had developed. The promotion ceremony was held in the base's main auditorium, with Admiral Catherine Reynolds, Pacific Fleet Deputy Commander, personally pinning the new rank insignia on Sarah's uniform. The Admiral's presence at such a routine promotion ceremony was unusual, and many of the attending officers wondered what made this particular advancement so significant. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," Admiral Reynolds said during her brief remarks, "has demonstrated the kind of innovative thinking and operational excellence that represents the best of our naval tradition. Her work here at Coronado has had direct impact on fleet operations across the Pacific, and I expect great things from her continued service." Sarah accepted the congratulations with her characteristic quiet grace. But those who knew her well could see the determination burning behind her modest demeanor. Commander Harrison, now her direct supervisor, had privately shared with her the scope of her new responsibilities, and they were unlike anything she had tackled before. The Strategic Operations Center had been selected to coordinate Operation Pacific Guardian, a classified multi-phase mission that would span 18 months and involve assets from across the Pacific Fleet. The operation's complexity was staggering, requiring coordination between submarine forces, surface ships, aircraft squadrons, and intelligence agencies across multiple countries. Sarah's new role as Deputy Strategic Operations Officer put her at the center of this massive undertaking. Her first major task was to develop the overall operational framework that would guide planning and execution across all phases of the mission. The challenge, Commander Harrison explained during their first planning meeting, is that we're essentially running 5 different operations simultaneously, with each phase depending on the success of the previous phases. One failure anywhere in the sequence could compromise the entire mission. Sarah studied the preliminary mission parameters spread across the conference table. Maritime patrol routes, submarine deployment schedules, intelligence gathering requirements, and diplomatic coordination timelines created a web of interconnected activities that seemed almost impossibly complex to manage. "How much flexibility do we have in the timing?" she asked, making notes on her tablet. "Very little. The intelligence window is narrow, and the political situation requires us to complete certain phases before regional tensions escalate further." Over the next month, Sarah worked 18-hour days developing what would become known as the Guardian Protocol, a comprehensive management system that tracked every aspect of the operation in real time while maintaining the flexibility to adapt to changing circumstances. Her approach was revolutionary in its simplicity. Rather than creating a rigid timeline that could collapse if any element failed, she designed a dynamic system that treated each operational component as both independent and interdependent. If one element encountered delays or complications, the system could automatically adjust the timing and resource allocation of other components to maintain overall mission integrity. The first test of her system came during the operational planning phase, when intelligence reports indicated that the submarine deployment schedule conflicted with unscheduled merchant shipping traffic in the target area. Traditional planning methods would have required weeks of revision and recoordination across multiple commands. Sarah's system identified the conflict within hours and generated 3 alternative approaches that maintained mission security while avoiding the shipping lanes. The submarine commanders were able to adjust their routes with minimal impact on their operational timeline, and the mission proceeded on schedule. Word of the Guardian Protocol's effectiveness spread quickly through the Pacific Fleet command structure. Senior officers who had initially been skeptical of such a complex operation began expressing confidence in the mission's prospects for success. But Sarah's real test came 6 months into the operation, when a diplomatic crisis in the South China Sea threatened to compromise the entire mission. Regional tensions had escalated unexpectedly, and several key partner nations were reconsidering their participation in the operation. Admiral Reynolds summoned Sarah to an emergency meeting at Pacific Fleet headquarters in Pearl Harbor. The flight from San Diego gave Sarah time to analyze the situation and develop potential responses, but even she was surprised by the complexity of the challenges they now faced. "Lieutenant Commander," Admiral Reynolds said as Sarah entered the secure briefing room, "I need options, and I need them fast. The Secretary of Defense is briefing the President tomorrow morning, and we need to present alternatives that can salvage this operation." Sarah had prepared for this possibility. Her analysis of the political situation had identified several pressure points that could destabilize the mission, and she had quietly developed contingency plans for each scenario. "Admiral, I believe we can restructure the operation to reduce the political exposure while actually improving our strategic position," she began. activating the wall-mounted display to show her analysis. Her presentation was masterful. She had identified ways to accomplish the mission's core objectives using only American and Australian assets, eliminating the need for participation by the nations that were wavering. The revised approach would take longer to implement, but would be more secure and ultimately more effective. "You're recommending we essentially start over?" Admiral Reynolds asked. "No, ma'am. I'm recommending we accelerate certain phases while delaying others, using the political crisis as cover for a more aggressive approach that will actually give us better intelligence and a stronger strategic position." The room was silent as the senior officers absorbed the implications of her proposal. Sarah was suggesting they turn a crisis into an opportunity, using the diplomatic confusion to mask a more ambitious operation than originally planned. Admiral Reynolds studied the revised operational timeline. "How confident are you that this approach will work?" 92%, based on my analysis of similar operations and current intelligence assessments. The risk factors are manageable and the potential benefits significantly outweigh the increased complexity. The meeting lasted 4 hours, with Sarah answering detailed questions about every aspect of her revised plan. When it concluded, Admiral Reynolds made the decision to present Sarah's approach to the Secretary of Defense. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," the Admiral said as the meeting ended, "I want you to personally brief the Joint Chiefs on this operation. Your analysis and planning have been exceptional, and they need to hear directly from you about implementation requirements." The Pentagon briefing was Sarah's introduction to the highest levels of military command. The Joint Chiefs of Staff meeting room was intimidating, with its mahogany table, formal portraits, and the weight of history that seemed to hang in the air. But Sarah's presentation was confident and compelling, demonstrating a level of strategic thinking that impressed even these veteran commanders. General Patricia Morrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, asked the question that everyone was thinking. "Lieutenant Commander, you're proposing what amounts to a complete restructuring of a major Pacific Fleet operation. That's a lot of responsibility for an officer of your rank. Are you certain you can manage the execution of this plan?" Sarah met the general's gaze directly. "Yes, ma'am. I've built my career on turning complex challenges into manageable systems. This operation is complicated, but it's not impossible. With the right team and appropriate resources, I'm confident we can achieve all mission objectives while maintaining operational security." The revised Operation Pacific Guardian was approved, and Sarah found herself managing the most complex military operation of her career. Her Guardian protocol proved invaluable as the mission unfolded over the following months, adapting to changing circumstances and coordinating activities across multiple time zones and command structures. The operation's success exceeded all expectations. Intelligence objectives were achieved ahead of schedule, strategic positions were strengthened throughout the Pacific, and the diplomatic crisis that had threatened to derail the mission actually provided better cover for American activities than the original plan had offered. Sarah's role in the operation's success did not go unnoticed. Her promotion to commander came with assignment to the Navy's most prestigious strategic planning position at the Pentagon, but she turned it down, choosing instead to remain at Coronado with expanded responsibilities for Pacific Fleet operations. "I'm more effective here," she explained to Admiral Reynolds during their final meeting. "The Pacific is where the real work is happening, and I want to be part of it." The Admiral studied Sarah with the appraising look of someone who recognized exceptional talent. "You know, Commander Mitchell, there aren't many officers who would turn down a Pentagon assignment at your stage of career development. Most people would see it as the fast track to flag rank." Sarah smiled slightly. "With respect, Admiral, I'm not most people. I believe I can make a more significant contribution to naval operations from here than I could from behind a desk in Washington." What Admiral Reynolds didn't know was that Sarah's decision was part of a much larger plan. Her work at Coronado had given her unprecedented insight into Pacific Fleet operations, and she had identified opportunities and vulnerabilities that could reshape American naval strategy in the region. Her new position as Senior Strategic Operations Officer put her in charge of all major planning activities for the Pacific Fleet's Western operations. It was a role typically held by much more senior officers, but Sarah's track record spoke for itself. She used her expanded authority to implement systematic improvements across multiple areas of fleet operations. Fuel efficiency programs reduced operational costs by millions of dollars while extending the range and endurance of deployed vessels. Maintenance scheduling optimization increased the availability of ships and aircraft while reducing the burden on repair facilities. Most importantly, Sarah developed what became known as the Pacific Integration Initiative, a comprehensive approach to coordinating American naval activities with allied forces throughout the region. The initiative transformed how the U.S. Navy worked with partners in Australia, Japan, South Korea, and other allied nations. Her work caught the attention of the Chief of Naval Operations, who personally visited Coronado to review Sarah's programs. Admiral James Crawford was known for his direct assessment of officers and programs, and his endorsement carried enormous weight throughout the Navy. "Commander Mitchell," Admiral Crawford said during their private meeting, "your work here represents the kind of innovative leadership the Navy needs at all levels. I'm recommending you for early promotion to captain, with assignment to Fleet Operations Command." The promotion would make Sarah one of the youngest captains in the modern Navy, with responsibility for coordinating operations across the entire Pacific theater. It was an unprecedented opportunity, and everyone expected her to accept immediately. But Sarah surprised them once again by requesting to remain at Coronado for one additional year. She had identified what she called critical vulnerabilities in current Pacific operations that required immediate attention, and she believed her unique position at the base made her the ideal person to address them. Admiral Crawford was intrigued by her assessment. "What kind of vulnerabilities are you talking about, Commander?" Sarah's response would change the trajectory of her entire career and establish her as one of the most important strategic minds in the modern Navy. The foundation she had built at Coronado was about to support something far more significant than anyone had imagined. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood before the assembled senior staff of Naval Base Coronado, her promotion to flag rank still fresh, and her new responsibilities as Base Admiral weighing heavily on her shoulders. The ceremony had been conducted with appropriate military protocol, but the real significance of her appointment went far beyond the traditional pomp and pageantry. At 34 years old, she was the youngest officer ever to command Coronado, and her rapid ascension through the ranks had generated considerable speculation throughout the Pacific Fleet. What most of her colleagues didn't understand was that every assignment, every project, and every success in her career had been carefully orchestrated as part of a mission that was about to reach its culmination. The secure briefing room in the base's intelligence center held only 6 people: Admiral Reynolds, who had flown in from Pearl Harbor; Captain Harrison, her former commander and now Chief of Staff; Commander Peterson, who had become one of her most trusted advisors; Chief Martinez, now a senior chief and her operations coordinator; Dr. Elizabeth Warren from the Office of Naval Intelligence; and Sarah herself. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Reynolds began, activating the room's electronic security measures and ensuring all communication devices were secured. "What I'm about to share with you is classified at the highest levels. Captain Mitchell's assignment to Coronado was never routine. For the past 5 years, she has been conducting the most important intelligence and strategic assessment operation in the modern history of the Pacific Fleet." The room was silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. Sarah had spent years building relationships, earning trust, and gaining access to every aspect of Pacific naval operations, not just as a rising officer, but as part of a carefully planned intelligence mission. Dr. Warren activated the main display screen, which showed a comprehensive map of the Pacific region with dozens of marked locations and data streams. Operation Deep Current, she explained, was designed to identify and address critical vulnerabilities in American naval operations throughout the Pacific. Captain Mitchell was selected for this mission because of her unique analytical abilities and her capacity to integrate into existing command structures without raising suspicion. Sarah spoke for the first time since the meeting began. The mission required me to assess every aspect of our Pacific operations from the inside, identify weaknesses that might not be apparent to traditional intelligence methods, and develop solutions that could be implemented without alerting potential adversaries to our concerns. The scope of what she had accomplished was staggering. Her work on fuel efficiency and maintenance scheduling had not just saved money, it had eliminated operational patterns that foreign intelligence services could have used to predict American naval movements. Her Guardian Protocol was not just a planning tool, it was a comprehensive system for conducting complex operations while maintaining complete operational security. The Pacific Integration Initiative, Sarah continued, was designed to create seamless coordination between American and Allied forces while establishing communication and command protocols that would be impossible for adversaries to penetrate or disrupt. Commander Peterson, who had worked with Sarah for years, was struggling to process this information. All those late nights, all the detailed analysis of our operations, you were identifying security vulnerabilities? Among other things, Sarah replied. But more importantly, I was developing solutions. Every improvement I implemented, every system I created was designed to strengthen our position while appearing to be routine efficiency measures. Admiral Reynolds activated another display showing a timeline of Sarah's activities over the past 5 years. Captain Mitchell identified 47 critical vulnerabilities in Pacific Fleet operations, developed solutions for all of them, and implemented corrective measures that have fundamentally improved our strategic position throughout the region. The most significant discovery had been what Sarah called the pattern problem. Through her analysis of operational data from across the Pacific Fleet, she had identified that American naval movements followed predictable patterns that sophisticated adversaries could exploit to anticipate and counter American operations. Her solution was revolutionary in its elegance. Rather than trying to hide American naval activities, she created what appeared to be routine operational procedures that actually generated false patterns and misleading indicators. Enemy intelligence services trying to track American movements would be fed accurate information that led to completely incorrect conclusions about American capabilities and intentions. The beauty of Captain Mitchell's approach, Dr. Warren explained, is that it turned our operational transparency into a strategic advantage. Our adversaries can observe our activities, but what they observe leads them to make incorrect assessments about our capabilities and plans. Sarah had also identified critical weaknesses in the supply chain and maintenance systems that supported Pacific Fleet operations. Foreign agents or cyber attacks targeting these systems could have crippled American naval operations across the region. Her efficiency improvements had actually been comprehensive security upgrades that hardened these systems against both physical and electronic threats. But the most important aspect of this mission, Admiral Reynolds continued, was Captain Mitchell's assessment of command and leadership vulnerabilities throughout the Pacific Fleet structure. Her recommendations have influenced personnel decisions and organizational changes at the highest levels of Navy leadership. Sarah's quiet observation of officers and enlisted personnel throughout her career had provided invaluable intelligence about the human factors that could affect naval operations. She had identified officers whose decision-making processes were compromised by personal issues, communication problems between different commands, and training deficiencies that could prove critical in combat situations. Your fitness reports and efficiency evaluations, she explained to the stunned officers in the room. have all been influenced by my assessments, not to harm anyone's career, but to ensure that personnel decisions were based on complete information about operational capabilities and potential risks. The scope of Sarah's influence extended far beyond Coronado. Her strategic assessments had shaped major policy decisions, influenced budget allocations, and guided the development of new technologies and procedures throughout the Navy. The quiet lieutenant who had arrived 5 years ago had systematically transformed American naval operations in the Pacific. Chief Martinez was the first to break the silence that followed these revelations. "Ma'am, with all due respect, how do we know that we can trust you now? If everything you've done has been part of a deception operation, how can we be sure about your real intentions?" Sarah smiled slightly, the first time her characteristic reserve had softened during the briefing. "Chief, that's exactly the right question to ask, and the fact that you're asking it is one of the reasons I recommended you for advancement. The answer is that this mission is over. The vulnerabilities have been identified and addressed, the improvements have been implemented, and the strategic position of American naval forces in the Pacific has been fundamentally strengthened." Admiral Reynolds nodded approvingly. "Captain Mitchell's mission required her to operate under deep cover for 5 years, building relationships and earning trust while conducting a comprehensive intelligence assessment. That mission has been successfully completed. Her appointment as Base Admiral represents the beginning of a new phase in her career, where she will use the insights gained during Operation Deep Current to guide American naval strategy in the Pacific." The implications of Sarah's new role were enormous. As Base Admiral of Coronado, she would have unprecedented influence over Pacific Fleet training, operations, and strategic planning. Her years of careful analysis and relationship building had positioned her perfectly to implement the changes necessary to maintain American naval supremacy in the region. "The international situation is becoming increasingly complex," Sarah explained, activating a new display showing current global naval deployments and tensions. "The insights I've gained about our operations, combined with my understanding of Allied capabilities and potential threat assessments, will be critical to developing effective responses to emerging challenges." Over the following months, Sarah implemented changes at Coronado that seemed routine but were actually revolutionary. Training exercises were modified to address the specific vulnerabilities she had identified. Communication protocols were updated to enhance security while improving efficiency. Personnel assignments were adjusted to place the most capable officers in the most critical positions. The transformation was subtle but comprehensive. Visiting officers from other commands began commenting on the exceptional quality of operations at Coronado. Training exercises conducted at the base achieved unprecedented levels of realism and effectiveness. The base's coordination with Allied forces became a model for international cooperation. Sarah's approach to leadership was as carefully calculated as everything else in her career had been. She maintained the same quiet, thoughtful demeanor that had characterized her rise through the ranks, but now her suggestions carried the weight of flag-rank authority. Her staff meetings became intense strategic sessions where complex operational challenges were analyzed and resolved with remarkable efficiency. The true test of her leadership came during a major crisis in the South China Sea, when tensions between regional powers threatened to escalate into armed conflict. American naval forces needed to respond quickly and decisively, but the situation required the kind of complex coordination that had previously taken weeks or months to arrange. Sarah's response demonstrated the full scope of what she had accomplished during her years at Coronado. Within hours of receiving initial reports, she had activated comprehensive response protocols that coordinated American, Australian, Japanese, and South Korean naval forces in a show of Allied unity and strength that effectively diffused the crisis. The operation involved 17 ships, 4 submarine squadrons, and dozens of aircraft operating across thousands of miles of ocean, all coordinated through systems and procedures that Sarah had developed during her previous assignments. The seamless execution of such a complex operation sent a clear message to potential adversaries about the true capabilities of Allied naval forces in the Pacific. Admiral Crawford, the Chief of Naval Operations, personally visited Coronado to review the crisis response operation. His assessment was unequivocal. Admiral Mitchell, what you've accomplished here represents the future of naval operations. The integration of Allied forces, the efficiency of your coordination systems, and the strategic insight demonstrated in your response to this crisis are exactly what the Navy needs in the 21st century. The visit concluded with a private meeting between Sarah and Admiral Crawford that would determine the next phase of her career. The Chief of Naval Operations had a proposition that would challenge everything she had accomplished and test the limits of her strategic capabilities. Sarah, Admiral Crawford said, using her first name for the first time in their professional relationship, I'm offering you command of the Pacific Fleet's newest and most important initiative. The Strategic Pacific Command will coordinate all American naval activities in the region, working directly with Allied forces and civilian authorities to maintain stability and security across half the globe. The appointment would make Sarah the most powerful naval officer in the Pacific, with responsibilities that extended far beyond traditional military operations. She would be responsible for coordinating with intelligence agencies, diplomatic services, and civilian authorities across multiple countries, managing relationships and operations that could determine the future of international relations in the region. As she considered this opportunity, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The quiet, seemingly harmless lieutenant who had arrived at Coronado 5 years ago had accomplished something unprecedented in military history. She had systematically assessed and strengthened American naval operations throughout the Pacific while building the relationships and expertise necessary to guide those operations into the future. Her acceptance of the Strategic Pacific Command appointment marked the beginning of a new chapter, where the skills and insights developed during Operation Deep Current would be applied to the broader challenges of maintaining peace and stability in the world's most strategically important region. The mission that had begun with her arrival at Coronado was evolving into something far more significant and lasting. The new girl who had seemed so harmless had indeed become Base Admiral, but that achievement was merely the foundation for responsibilities and challenges that would test the very limits of strategic leadership in the modern world.